We're just delighted here at the NCRCRD to introduce and welcome Dr. Rick Funston, who is a professor and a reproductive physiologist at the University of Nebraska. University of Nebraska, of course, is a leader in beef research and extension. Dr. Funston divides his time in both of these arenas. He does a lot of work in beef cattle systems research and trying to help producers become more profitable. His work has received national and international attention and adoption, so we're just thrilled to host Dr. Funston as part of our Innovations in Agriculture and Rural Development series here at the NCRCRD, in which he's going to talk about best management practices that can have a profound impact on the profitability of beef cattle operations. So welcome, Rick. Are you ready to go?
Yep. Thank
Great.
you, Carolyn.
No problem.
All right. Well, I'm going to be talking about some factors that influence overall reproduction, pregnancy rate, but also the importance of when animals become pregnant in a given breeding season. I'm located at North Platte, which is at right here at the confluence of the North and South Platte Rivers. These are all locations where we have beef cattle research and very well supported in our university system. Do a lot of work up at the Goodmanson Sandhills Laboratory in the heart of the Sandhills with systems research that Carolyn talked about, looking at relevant questions that producers might have, but not only how does it impact that immediate response, which might be reproductive outcome, but how does it affect those calves that perhaps aren't even born yet? Many of you, or we all, are aware of this, and I think it speaks volumes of what research and extension has done, being able to produce similar levels of beef as we have had back in the 70s with a declining cow herd. The concern here is the sustainability of the beef industry, and we've already seen some effects in the industry where we're closing packing plants and we have a lot of excess feed yard capacity. A lot of this beef production was due to the cull cows that went to market because of drought, and this year their projection is this number is going to be down in total beef production when demand is actually rising. This ability to sustain beef production, there's been a lot of work done in the feedlots that allowed us to make bigger carcasses, but also I believe reproduction is a big player in this, in that we've been able to wean more calves with some of the advanced technologies that we have today and better management. But if we're going to look at efficiency of a system, there's a lot of talk on feed efficiency today and other measures of efficiency, but this is from my genetics friends, and they put it pretty interestingly. By simply increasing number of progeny per dam through either selection, heterosis from crossing, or better management, will increase efficiency of production. So it is a key that reproductive rate is key to efficiency of a beef production system. They would talk a lot about where does it begin with the sire and how long a breeding season we have. That impacts obviously pregnancy rates, but just even leaving bulls in for extended period of time, if there's some other issues in the system, it won't correct them. So that's just part of it. It really starts with our heifer development program and selection criteria and how long a breeding season we have for these females. I think many of you are aware of some of the work we've done with lower input systems, and we're finding that we can decrease production costs. This enterprise, this heifer enterprise, is actually a profitable enterprise. Even if those females aren't pregnant at pregnancy diagnosis, they're a valuable yearling and feeder animal. But it involves keeping essentially all of the females for breeding purposes. Having a short breeding season, lighter breeding weights, it does result in more efficient animals, at least out to the past the fourth pregnancy diagnosis, and we believe this is a method to determine adaptability earlier in a system. Even if you aren't comfortable with as light a target weight as we have, if you just do the math from time from weaning to breeding and maybe a more comfortable target weight, those heifers really don't have to gain very much to to reach that. Some of our heifers, we've gone to synchronizing all of our cattle with natural service, where we turn the bulls in, and then 5 days later, everything is given a injection of prostaglandin. And that has been very effective at both having older calves at weaning, heavier calves at weaning, and our preg rates. We even shortened our breeding season 15 days, and our preg rates essentially were the same. And we increased returns by over $35 a head with that system with natural service. To further illustrate the importance of calving period, we divided the steers and heifers, in this case the steers, by when they were born, first, second, or third cycle. We had heavier steers at weaning all the way to harvest, and greater quality grade. And if you look at the heifers, heavier at weaning, heavier at puberty, higher pregnancy rates, and more calved in the first 21 days, and we had a better and earlier breed back. Bob Cushman at U.S. Meat Animal Research Center took this kind of a different approach, but categorized heifers by when they became pregnant, and found that these heifers that became pregnant in the first cycle, there were more still in the herd at 9 years of age, and collectively weaned, essentially heavier calf out to the sixth weaning of their sixth calf. I think this gives us pretty good reasoning to have a high percent of animals that conceive early in our calving season, and maybe synchronization, or in our breeding season, and maybe synchronization is a tool that we can use to achieve that. We've got very effective synchronization systems, and this website I'll show you again at the end, but is part of our reproduction task force. A lot of great information on reproductive management and these sync systems. Probably the most important reason to have a high percent of calves born early is what you do for the cow. She has a much lower chance of becoming open if she calves up front in your calving season compared to later. And it takes the profit from 2 early calving cows to cover the loss of 1 late calver, and a cow that calves in her first cycle her entire life will produce essentially 2 more calves. Harlan Hughes says the real opportunities on a ranch are to move late calvers up, and just looking at some factors that influence when animals become pregnant and overall pregnancy rate. This is a study looking at some different synchronization systems across 14 states, and these were the kind of variation they had. Certainly, the overwhelming factor is this. Fertilization rate in beef cattle is very high, 90 to 100%, but we lose 30% of the embryos before day 40. Certainly, genetics plays a role in that. Direct selection for reproductive traits is pretty ineffective, because all these things have to happen to have a live calf born, and we essentially categorize reproductive traits as lowly heritable. Things that affect pregnancy, though, that we manage for, probably a reason if we're going to AI, we AI a lot of heifers. Calving ease, animals that don't have dystocia have breed back sooner. And when you give assistance, animals that are given assistance sooner breed back sooner and actually wean heavier calves. We look at scrotal circumference as something, a fertility indicator in bulls to some extent, but daughters from bulls with larger scrotal circumference reach puberty sooner. The challenge, I think, is in some of this selection, and this is that genetic trend for scrotal circumference, is when does some of these traits reach a threshold? And I think maybe this has happened, at least here. We have heifers becoming pregnant when they come in on the cow before weaning. That certainly is a challenge for operations. So every trait has a threshold. Our production traits, we know too much milk in a limited resource environment is not sustainable, as well as too much growth. So we have to, be aware of what our production system can handle as far as these output traits. Larry Cora, before he went to work for CAB, said, thus as we strive to improve growth rate in the cattle industry to make the commercial cow more efficient from utilizing nutrients, we must ensure that we maintain an optimum level of reproduction efficiency. So very important to the system. And our genetic trends for nearly every trait that we're measuring are on an incline, on an increase, and I think we need to be aware of how that's going to affect carrying capacity and ultimately reproductive rate. Let's not forget about technology. We've got tools out there that don't increase inputs that have been well proven to improve outputs on a given operation, such as implants. And largely on the cow-calf sector, we've quit using them. And I think we can use these without having animals or females that have more milk and growth and still get a huge economic benefit. Crossbred females, we know that there's greater longevity, heavier calf weight per cow exposed, more net profit per cow. It's over $100 a year advantage of having a crossbred female. And if we want to look at what characterizes an ideal beef cow, has minimum maintenance requirements, can withstand feed shortage, and gets pregnant on time every time, and has excellent maternal traits. So very important to have a female that fits your environment.
Hi, Rick.
Some indicators
Rick, this is Carolyn. Sorry to interrupt, but just take a look. If people are asking you to slow down a little bit, please.
I just have too many slides, I understand.
Okay, fair enough.
These will be posted so you guys can go over them. You guys can go over them, ask me questions. Make sure to take notes. And we'll cover any questions. So body condition is a proxy for postpartum interval, but it's not absolute, as we'll show you some research here in a minute. One word of caution for some of our herds that have moved to later calving. We've done a lot of studies with time of calving. We can get an older cow pregnant anytime, but the challenge is some of these younger animals in this study, in this May calving herd, the 3-year-olds were the youngest, and they had significantly lower conception rate. And our heifer calves pregnancy rate was lower as well. We even had them on 2 different growth planes going into breeding, and saw a significantly lower pregnancy rate than our spring calving herd, and found that if we supplemented these heifers and first calf heifers during breeding, we improved pregnancy rates up to 20%. A lot of work going on in the industry about what are specific nutrients important for reproduction. I've written a review paper on this, and I'll just say that this isn't a cure-all. A lot of discussion on fat supplementation, but we really need to look at our major nutrients first. Minerals, a complex system. We have a lot of interactions with antagonists and in the environment, perhaps in the water and other feed sources. And trace minerals are important if they're deficient for either a lack of or an antagonism in the environment. One thing I recommend with producers is to if you're feeding a supplement, to feed an ionophore. Independent of the other benefits, there's fairly good indication, at least in some studies, that rumensin can have a positive effect on the percent that are pregnant in the first cycle, and a higher preg rate even with the same inputs on roughage environment. So something I would recommend. We mentioned moving late calvers up. This was a data set looking at about 2,300 first calf heifers, and then how many were cycling? About half, and half weren't. They were synchronized with a protocol from our task force and time bred, and we got just as high a preg rate in those anestrus animals as we did with those that were cycling. So what was the protocol? It was using this. And this is a real opportunity to move late calvers up with the Cedar. And we've moved late calving cows up as much as 2 cycles. So there's a balance needed: protein, energy, minerals, vitamins. Don't forget about water and what's in the water. And these 4 categories are major factors that influence embryonic loss. There's a genetic component, obviously, an environmental component, which we've touched on, nutrition, which we've touched on, and then some miscellaneous things that may or may not become an issue with beef cattle, like low progesterone, which is a problem in the dairy cattle, but it's largely a function of high milk production. So let's just look at some things that we might consider to perhaps circumvent or overcome some of these challenges of this embryonic loss. These are 3 different heifer development programs to the same target weight, and essentially similar age at puberty and conception rates. Interestingly, though, these on this low then high plane compared to the steady gain, they did it with 12% less feed, and those heifers' first service conception rate on that late gain was significantly greater than those on just the even gain. So this flushing effect, or moving from a lower nutritional plane to a higher going into breeding, is very real in beef cattle as well. And those heifers that were on that low high, there were more in the herd at 5 years of age. So very important. Even it's a win-win, right? Because we did it with less feed and a higher first service conception rate. This is some work we're doing. Heifers just came home from corn stalks yesterday, actually, but heifers on corn stalks or in a dry lot, significantly different weight at breeding. And if you would guess which would have a higher AI conception rate or pregnancy rate, you'd probably guess these heavier heifers, but that in fact was not the case. These lighter heifers had higher conception rate than these heavier heifers. Now, how could that be? So just moving to what their actual gain was, over winter, those heifers on corn stalks gained about less than a pound a day. In the dry lot, they gained gained a pound and a half a day. Sorry, this is over winter. And then we synchronized and AI'd these heifers and turned them out to pasture. And in the same pasture grazing side by side, we saw a pound a day difference in gain. So these heifers that were on stalks outgained the heifers that were in the dry lot by over a pound a day while they were establishing pregnancy. And I believe that's the reason we saw higher first service conception rate. We tend to manage breeding females up until the time of breeding and then maybe don't pay attention to what happens when they're trying to establish pregnancy. And this nutrition or perception of nutrition, these were not fed any different. They were grazing in the same pasture, but they saw this environment differently based on their previous experience. And it's not all compensatory gain. I think largely a lot of this is just these heifers that grazed all their life essentially were better foragers. Word of caution is some work Cliff Lamb did when he was in Minnesota, made heifers either condition 7 or 5 and then restricted them till they quit cycling, and saw these fat heifers had to get a full condition score greater than these that maintained at a condition score 5. So the question becomes, are we programming females to be dependent on a certain amount of body fat to ever become pregnant? I mentioned body condition not being absolute. This study looked at the effect of supplementation while grazing winter range, and those cows that weren't supplemented had lower body condition at calving. So here's calving. Here's breeding, in which would you suspect would have the higher pregnancy rate? Well, they were very similar, but largely the lack of difference, I think, is what's going on from calving to breeding. These cows essentially caught up, but as many of you have heard me speak about, it's not just about the cow or that immediate response that we think we're supplementing a cow for, because we saw those heifer calves then that were out of cows that weren't supplemented on winter range. Yeah, they were lighter, which may not be a bad thing at pregnancy diagnosis, but we affected pregnancy rate in those females by not supplementing the mothers during gestation. So something that happened before that calf was ever born, by how we managed the cow, influenced the heifer calf's breeding ability, also influences the steer carcass weight and marbling score. So a lot of things that affect estrus response and conception. We talked about a lot of these: body condition, age. Younger animals have a longer postpartum interval, how many are cycling in a herd, and nutrition, weather, and the correct application of protocols is key. And I think we are thinking about our synchronization systems, maybe AI, and I think there's going to be a lot of heifers artificially inseminated this year. And we have excellent protocols, but they need to be followed. And here's our Beef Repro website again, beefrepro.info. You can download the synchronization planner. It has some really great features. Print out a calendar so you you know when to do what. And also on this website, there's a lot of our really good information from our past repro conferences. The last one was in Stanton, Virginia. We're going to be having one in Stillwater, Oklahoma in October of this year. But those proceedings, slides, recorded talks from experts in the field of reproductive management, all on this website. And then just another website, I'll show you in a second, but just to sum up, focus on a high percentage pregnant early. Begins with heifer development. And if you're ever going to have a non-pregnant female in a beef herd, it better be one that hasn't ever been pregnant, right? So, or otherwise they're can be a huge liability. Consider synchronization, and then supplementation. In particular, in these later calving herds, the inputs maybe aren't needed prior to breeding as much as during breeding, especially in those what I've termed high-risk animals. And maybe they're the only ones that need supplementing. But those high-risk females, you know, and the heifer calf is one of them we're finding. And I never think it's that difficult to get a heifer pregnant, but certainly in those later calving systems, they don't breed as well without more inputs. Body condition at calving as a proxy, for example, sound herd health program, never even touched that, but very important to work with your veterinarian. Genetics that fit the environment, and this, I call it lost art of heterosis. This crossbred female is going to produce you 1 to 2 more calves than a straight bred female. And that's really where the advantage is. It's not in any production measure per se, although we find that breed complementarity, combining the good things the Angus does with the Continental, can really balance out quality and yield grade all the way to end product, and also have a more fertile female. So our beef website, beef.unl.edu, we've got a lot of webinars on here. We found that our producers really like that as a venue to go to their short deals like we just did here, 20 minutes or so, and there's probably 80 of them on there. All the way, there's one on synchronization I've done, one on heifer development, and all our other beef specialists have contributed too. And we have people in every area of beef production that support our beef website, and our 2014 beef report is on here as well. Excellent website. And just my contact information, and I think we're pretty close to on time. I apologize for rushing through some things, but I wanted to really make a lot of points in a short period of time for you to give some thought to, rather than spend a lot of time talking on any one thing. And a lot of this information you can find on our beef website as well. So I see a question: can you better define early versus late calving herds or ranges based on pasture turnout? So I guess, I don't know where you're from, but in our environment in Nebraska, in a spring calving herd, we tend to have pretty good forage quality during breeding. So that would be, we're breeding in June versus our May calving herd. Our May calving herd, they would calve in May, obviously, but they would be breeding in, say, August. So our forage quality is declining more dramatically in that later calving system than it is our early calving system. And I depending on what your forage environment is, in Michigan, I guess you had turnout as early May. That I would guess your forage quality is probably going to be pretty good through your breeding season.
Thanks, Rick. That was fascinating. This is Carolyn Hatch. I've brought a couple of polls up on the screen there. I'd encourage those who haven't filled them out to please do so. We want to know a little bit more about you and how you heard about the webinar. And more questions, please, in the chat box. If you have a question, put it in the chat box.
So Kevin says very similar, good early and declines in August window. So yeah, similar to our production environment. I don't know if you're producers or yourself or what you do, but whether this is an issue with, as you find in your later breeding seasons, i.e. later calving seasons, I think it's a function, and it's not necessarily a function of forage quantity. We started realizing this in the non-drought years that that we had issues with these higher risk females. So they had, forage was there, but they were not, the quality wasn't. So for the late gaining heifers that were fed the stalks, were they supplemented as well, or strictly the stalks? So on our younger females, we do supplement on grazing corn residue, about a pound of a 30% cube. In older cows, we have seen very little to no benefit of supplementing those cows while winter grazing corn residue. And same with winter grass, where we talk about heifer development on winter grass, we feed about a pound of a 30% cube. What about native tallgrass prairie where cattle calve in February and remain on pasture year round? I guess I'd have to know more what the forage quality was. I would assume in a dormant forage situation, you'd be similar, poor forage quality. So do you need to supplement? If you're calving in February, your breeding season forage quality is probably pretty good. We've seen very little benefit of winter supplementation on our older cows on themselves rebreeding, but if you look at, if you want to go to that Beef Repro website and look at some of our fetal programming work, we see a detriment on the calf production out of those cows that aren't supplemented. But I think it's tied to body condition, where those females slip below a body condition 5. Okay, what about native tallgrass prairie or cattle? We got that one. Okay, Kevin, makes sense, especially the flushing point you made. I've really seen that, especially with increased twinning on supplement cows at breeding time with byproduct feeds. Interesting. That's the true definition of flushing, was in sheep, where the higher level of energy actually increased twinning rate. We have not seen that in the beef female, but a flushing response in the beef female be in an improved reproductive rate. So that's interesting, you see that. Did I miss any there? But yeah, I think a real important point as you're designing your breeding program or your nutritional program, we always want females moving forward, and don't forget about how they're going to respond when they go to grass. So just a word of caution that if you have heifers or cows gaining, 3-4 pounds a day going into breeding, they're not going to sustain that post breeding when they go to grass. Keep that in mind, that we need to design our nutritional program with the intent of what's the next step? What are they going to gain when they're trying to establish pregnancy? Okay, when do you raise the level of nutrition of the heifers prior to breeding? We've done it a lengthy amount of time before, but more recently our work, we just brought heifers home from stocks yesterday. They're going to go to winter grass with our winter grass treatment here. And then we won't bring them into the lot until we start synchronizing them with MGA. So maybe 40 days before breeding, in that window. And don't push them hard. We're talking a pound and a half a day in the feedlot. And they will outperform, those heifers that were on stocks or winter grass will outperform what your ration says they will do. And part of that's compensatory gain. Okay, you mentioned fetal programming and the work you've done regarding future production and reproductive efficiency. What about setting up the immune system early during gestation? Oh, good question. We've measured some immune response measured by mortality, or not mortality, mortality and morbidity. But yeah, we don't know the reason, or if it's total immune response, but one study we saw the cows that weren't supplemented weaned more live calves, and we also saw the cows that were supplemented, the cows that were supplemented weaned more live calves, and the cows that were supplemented had calves that during the feeding phase had less morbidity. There's this whole question of colostrum quality too being impacted by nutrition prior to calving, and was that different? We didn't measure colostrum quality or quantity. That could be tied to it. Ken Odie's work in Colorado would indicate that protein prior to calving is important for that colostrum. But yeah, there's a paper on that Repro website, a review paper that myself and a grad student have written, as well as we've got a couple other more technical review papers. If you're interested, I could send you that are published in referee journals. Other questions? Maybe I didn't need to go so fast.
Looks like someone's typing. Dwayne is typing something.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions for Rick? You see that one, Rick?
So yeah, there's you mentioned fetal programming. No, next one. Did you change your bull-to-cow ratio when the cows are given prostaglandin? Good question. I get that a lot. No, we did not. And I should ask, what is your bull-to-cow ratio? But we're essentially at 1 to 18 or so on a yearling bull, 1 to 20 to 25 on an older bull. So if you think about that system, we got 5 days potentially of those bulls breeding cows before we give the shot. So we could have up to 25% pregnant by then, and then the shot isn't going to act immediately, so probably another 2 days of natural breeding of cattle just coming in heat. So we got 7 days, 35% potentially pregnant before you give prostaglandin, and you know, one faulty. Some people think that it'll abort those animals that got pregnant. Well, you see by our preg rate, we didn't, and we just pushed up when they be conceived. But that corpus luteum is too young to be responsive to prostaglandin at day 5. What about the fatty acid work that is being done? Do you have a general opinion if we can set up or change reproductive efficiency by applying specific fatty acids? I would sure give you the review paper I wrote. It's a complex system. If there's any benefit of supplementing fat, it's prior to calving. Post calving during breeding, there's actually some fatty acids that might be negative effect on reproduction, such as linoleic fat sources high in linoleic acid. University of Wyoming has some work looking at that post breeding or during breeding and post calving, and linoleic acid is converted to arachidonic acid, which is a precursor for prostaglandin. Is the mechanism thought there, but there's just not a lot of. If your other nutrition is in line and your cattle are meeting requirements, otherwise, there's not a lot of real strong evidence that supplemental fat will have a positive effect on reproduction. I'm very interested in some of the protein work, and we're working on that. Bypass protein to some, especially younger, higher risk animals, and we get that in distillers grains. I think we have seen a positive effect of supplementing a distillers grain supplement over one that's balanced for crude protein and crude fat. Were you going to say something, Carolyn? Sorry, I don't see any more typing, but if there's more questions, I know Carolyn's putting up some more polls. If you guys would.
Couple more polls. One I'm going to bring in while we have a lull here geared towards producers. I want to know a little bit more. Let's see. Oh yeah, here. And keep the questions coming. We've got some more time left. Rick, this one's for you.
Okay. Fatty acids is the last one. I think I'm keeping up with these. There's somebody typing. I don't see a question yet, but as soon as it comes up. But just think about what we talked about. There's a huge opportunity based on when your animals calve to improve productivity without improving or increasing resources. What about the fatty acid work? We got that one, right? At what percentage of mature weight do you breed your heifers, and has that declined from the past? We're in that 50 to 55%. So our mature cow size is 1,200 pounds at weaning. So we're looking at a 6-weight heifer to 6.5. On our Goodmanson cattle, which are crossbred females, we've decreased that as well in some more straightbred cattle, and 55%, we're not having any issues. And the big thing is they'll make a lot of that up during the grazing season, and their response when they go to grass is so much better than those heifers that are confined and fed to a higher rate of gain, or even confined at all. But anything we can do to improve the percent calving early in our calving season has a huge effect on any operation. I may have missed it. Did you see a higher rate of success using the bull or AI? I'm not sure what that refers to. Do you get a higher preg rate with bull or AI? I think the research would say on a given insemination, they're very similar to conception rates to AI or natural service, if that's your question. If it's not, give me some more information. So yeah, our and we get real similar pregnancy outcome with just timed AI anymore. We've got excellent systems that work, that really work, and with anestrus females. So I've made this point, and it was in what we were going to talk about today, but that event of when your animals calve, and then if you have an extended calving period in your herd, we can move those late calvers up, and they are a huge opportunity. I had an individual that had 80 late calving cows, and I was talking in our Nebraska Ranch practicum, and he said, I didn't think there were anything I could do with these, and he put Cedars in all of them, and the vet preg checked them in the fall, and he said his diagnosis was that they moved 90% of them up 2 cycles. 2 cycles on a cow, that's 40 some days a calf at 2 pounds a day, 80 pounds more calf for what a cedar costs and prostaglandin. So it's just put the cedar in, 7 days later, pull it and give prostaglandin, and then they just turn the bulls out. And there's somebody typing from
I got a couple of incoming questions, it looks like. Oh, no.
So you see a higher success using the bull. We talked about that, whether I answered it sufficiently. How many days post-calving did they put cedars in late cows? Cedars are labeled, and that's all we can go by. Cedars are labeled for 30 days plus postpartum. So, which those cows probably aren't cycling, right? But you can put them in at 30 days according to label. We talk about how body condition can change your pregnancy rate, but it seems like the animal's plan of nutrition is more important than body condition. Oh, absolutely. I agree that what's happening, that change in body weight gain, is probably more important than just strict condition. I'd rather just put it this way. I'd rather have a thin cow gaining condition than a fat cow going the other way. And we see that body fat can be very misleading in these later calving herds if they're on a declining plane of nutrition. You mentioned that we may be programming heifers that we develop at a higher weight body condition. If they go anovulatory, it takes a higher condition to start them. What's the mechanism behind this? I'm going to throw out a hormone, and it's probably from Robin, right? Leptin, maybe. hormone produced by fat cells, that has direct correlation or connection to reproduction. That's just a theory. I don't know that I've proven it. Will the cedar cause an N-estrus heifer to cycle and conceived on a timed AI? What percent pregnant have you seen? So it depends on how deep N-estrus they are. If they're close to cycling, yes, it will. We've seen in a heifer that's not have calved yet. We're just talking the yearling heifer. I like the 14-day cedar and the MJ program. Those two are my choice. If you can get MJ into the heifers, the MJ program obviously is less expensive, but 14-day cedar I've seen really good results with in that heifer. The 7-day works great in first calf heifers and cows, but not as good in the yearling heifer. What's your latest thoughts on feeding high quality alfalfa hay, nitrogen, high degradable protein or soluble protein, and the effect on uterine pH and conception? Yeah, good question. Too much protein without enough energy can be a problem. And the biggest, I guess, example maybe of that would be in this lush, fertilized grass, irrigated forage that is kept very lush and has high nitrogen. Feeding alfalfa hay, some people have done it for years and say it's not a problem. And then you have people that just have fed straight alfalfa hay for some reason and their pregnancy rates aren't very good. So it's an energy protein balance. I know the embryo guys won't feed alfalfa hay to their recips for sure. They know that there's some issues with embryo survival with too much nitrogen and not enough energy. And let's keep in mind, everyone, we're calving now, and if we're going to balance diets post calving, there's no forage that will meet energy requirements of a young lactating female. So energy, pay attention to energy, and you're going to probably need some additional energy in those females. And sometimes we just think it's a protein effect, and it's energy becomes real limiting in some of these animals that have lower intake. George Perry's done some work in South Dakota, feeding really, really high levels of nitrogen, I think, with distillers, and I don't believe he was able to alter uterine pH, which has been the mechanism we've often thought is behind the more embryonic loss or lower pregnancy rates. Well, you guys all have my contact information. Unfortunately, with the internet, I'm pretty easy to find, but and these slides will be posted somewhere in PDF. I don't know, Carolyn, if it's on your guys' website.
Yeah, actually, thanks, Rick. That was fascinating, and also thanks for all the great Q&A coming from the audience. So let me just move this down so you can see Rick's email. And you can feel free to follow up with Rick. And Rosa, is there anything else? Can you just comment on how we're posting this on the website, etc.? Rosa, are you there? Okay.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I'm going to put the, I'll put it under the chat.
Great. I wanted to encourage anyone who hasn't filled out the poll on the screen to please do so. And let's see. So I wanted to thank you all. Thanks, Rick, for your presentation. Thanks to all of you for your attendance. And the webinar will be posted on our website as per Rosa's comments, along with a PDF of the PowerPoint. So feel free to access accordingly, to share, disseminate, etc. So that's about it. I guess I can conclude. Rick, was there anything else you wanted to say at this time?
I don't think so. I don't see any more questions coming in. If there's any final question, I'll hang around. I got to figure out how I'm going to get to Arizona tomorrow.
Oh no. Any final questions, please? Now's the time. All right.